Do you ever look at the child you raised and see a total stranger I have? They say being forgotten while you still breathe is worse than death. My only son didn't just try to erase my past. He tried to erase my present, one memory at a time. He called me senile to hide his crimes. But he forgot one thing: a senile woman may forget her keys, but she never forgets how to get even. My name is Margaret. I am 68 years old, and for 41 of those years, I was the head librarian at the university. My life has been one of order, of cataloguing, of knowing exactly where everything belongs. My house, a craftsman here in Portland, is a testament to that. Every book has its place, and every object holds a memory of my late husband, Arthur. I am sharp. I am organized. And I guard our family heritage as fiercely as I once guarded the rare books collection. The doubt began on a Tuesday morning, the kind where the Oregon rain clings to the windows and refuses to let go. I was dressing to meet my book club, a simple act, but I reached for the one piece of jewelry I wore for special occasions, my great-grandmother's pearl brooch. It was not in its velvet box on my dresser. I am a creature of habit. The brooch always lived in that box. I never put it anywhere else. A small knot of cold unease tightened in my stomach. I checked the drawer, then the bathroom counter. Nothing. I went downstairs. My son, David, and his fiancée, Victoria, were at the kitchen island, scrolling through their phones over expensive coffee. They had moved in 6 months ago, ostensibly to care for me. David is 32, and Victoria, or Tori, as she insists on being called, is 29. She is an event planner, and her polished, expensive aesthetic clashed with the warm, worn wood of Arthur's home. "David," I said, my voice calmer than I felt, "have you or Tori seen my pearl brooch, the one from my great-grandmother?" Tori looked up, not from her phone, but with a bright, dismissive laugh that grated on the quiet morning. "Oh, Mother Margaret," she said, using the name she'd adopted for me. "I'm sure you just set it down somewhere. You know how your memory has been lately." I stiffened. "My memory is fine, Victoria. It was in its box." "Tori's right. Mom." David chimed in, not meeting my eyes. He reached over and gave my hand a weak, placating pat. "Just the other day, you forgot the kettle was on the stove until it whistled itself dry. Remember?" My breath caught. He was right. I had done that. A sudden, chilling wave of confusion washed over me. Had I taken the brooch out? Had I set it down while tidying and forgotten? I felt a sudden, terrifying uncertainty, as if the floorboards of my own mind had grown unstable. I mumbled something and went back upstairs, my heart pounding. I searched my room again, my hands starting to tremble, pulling open drawers I knew were empty. The brooch was gone. I felt unmoored, lost in my own sanctuary. I was still reeling from the fruitless search when I came back downstairs. Tori seized on my visible distress, her smile widening. "Since you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, we thought this would be the perfect time to share some good news." David sat up straighter, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We set a date, Mom, for the wedding." "Oh," I said, trying to focus. "That's wonderful. It's going to be at the Arboleda Vineyard?" Tori gushed, showing me a picture on her phone of a sprawling estate in the Willamette Valley, draped in fairy lights. "A full weekend event. Isn't it divine?" I looked at the image, at the sheer scale of it. I knew what event planners charged, And I knew David's salary. My financial mind, at least, was still intact. My goodness, I said slowly. That looks magnificent. How on earth can we possibly afford? Don't worry about money. Mum. David cut me off, his voice suddenly firm, almost rehearsed. We've got it handled. We just want you to be happy and not have to stress about a thing. He smiled at me, but the warmth was gone. The rain lashed against the windows, and the air in my warm, book-filled home turned unmistakably cold. The uneasiness from that Tuesday settled into my bones, a damp chill that the following weeks could not dry out. I tried to convince myself that Tori was right, that I had simply misplaced the brooch. I became obsessively careful, noting where I put my keys, my glasses, my teacup. But this vigilance only made the next discovery more brutal. It was Arthur's study, his sanctuary. I went in every Thursday afternoon to dust, just as I always had. I opened the door, and the room felt wrong. I looked at the mahogany display cabinet where he kept his collection of antique pocket watches. The glass was clean, but the shelves inside were bare. Where the dozen heavy, intricate timepieces had rested, there was nothing but faint, circular impressions in the dark blue velvet lining. This was not confusion. This was a violation. A white-hot anger burned through me, clearing away all the fog of self-doubt. I marched straight to the kitchen. David was there, alone this time, reading the mail. David, I said, my voice low and shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in years. Who went into your father's study? He flinched. What are you talking about? Mum. The watches. Arthur's watches are gone. All of them. Before he could stammer out a reply, Tori glided into the room, holding her phone up as if it were a shield. See? David. This is exactly what I was worried about. She turned her bright, false smile on me. Mother Margaret? We were just talking about this. The doctor said agitation and baseless accusations are a classic symptom. Symptom of what? I demanded. A symptom of being robbed by my own family. A symptom of what you're going through, she said, her voice dripping with artificial pity. We've been so worried. I even downloaded this MindGuard app. It's to help us track your episodes. I felt the blood drain from my face. Episodes. David finally found his voice, prodded by Tori's presence. Mum, please calm down. We put them away. For safekeeping. Safekeeping from who? From me. You've been confused, he said, the words clearly tasting like ash in his mouth. But he said them anyway. You were taking them out, Mum, just last week. We found you trying to wind them, all at once. You were polishing them with furniture polish. We were afraid you were going to damage them. They're valuable. I did no such thing, I whispered. But the lie was so specific, so detailed, that it momentarily staggered me. Had I done that, I couldn't remember doing it, but I hadn't been able to find the brooch, either. Where are they? David? I asked, my voice trembling now, the anger giving way to a sickening dread. Tori stepped forward, placing a hand on David's shoulder, claiming him. They're somewhere safe. Margaret, you don't need to worry your head about it. Why don't you go lie down? You look tired. That was the turning point. The help began in earnest. It was suffocating. I woke up one morning to find my kitchen drawers plastered with large print labels, like a kindergarten classroom, bowls, spoons, cups, as if I, Who had designed that kitchen? No longer knew where anything was. Then the cameras appeared. 2 small white orbs. One in the living room, one in the hall. For your safety. Mom, David explained, not looking at me. Just to make sure you don't have a fall when we're out. I felt their lenses follow me, turning my home into a sterile observation room. The final wall of my prison was the telephone. I was expecting a call from my neighbour, Mr. Henderson, about our shared fence. I was in the living room, under the camera's eye, when the phone rang. Before I could even stand up, Tori snatched it from the cradle. Hello, oh. Hi, Mr. Henderson. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Oh, she's resting right now. Yes. She's been just a bit confused today. Poor thing. Yes. I'll be sure to tell her you called. Of course. She hung up. I stared at her, my hands gripping the arms of my chair. I am right here, Victoria. I know, dear, she said, patting my shoulder as she walked by. We don't want to overtire you. That night, sitting in the silence of my own home, the fear finally crystallized. It was no longer the vague, creeping terror that I was losing my mind. It was the cold, hard certainty that I was being buried alive by the 2 people I was supposed to trust, treated as an inconvenience to be managed, a problem to be solved. They weren't just taking my things, they were taking my voice. Across the street from my house, in a bungalow just as tidy as mine, lives Mr. Henderson. He is in his early 70s, a widower and a retired carpenter whose hands, though gnarled with arthritis, still understand the world in a way most people's do not. He and Arthur had been inseparable, 2 old-timers who could spend an entire afternoon critiquing the city's poor pruning of the maple trees. Henderson is a quiet man, but a carpenter's eyes miss nothing. He sees the warped floorboard before it creaks, the loose shingle before the rain gets in. He had been watching, not out of nosiness, but out of a habit born from decades of friendship. He noticed things. He noticed, for instance, a plain black van with no company logo parked in my driveway the previous Thursday. He knew, as well as I did, that I was at my book club from 2 until 4 every Thursday afternoon. He had seen David and Tori let 2 men in, and he had seen them carry things out. Worried by the phone call he'd had with Tori, he had tried to visit me the next day, using the excuse of a piece of misdelivered mail. Tori had intercepted him on the porch, a bright, hard smile fixed on her face. She's having a terrible day, Mr. Henderson, she'd said, her voice loud enough for me to hear from the living room. The doctor was very clear about limiting visitors. It just confuses her more. He'd retreated, but he did not stop watching. His chance came 4 days later. Tori had decided I needed fresh air and a simple task. She had set me in the front garden bed with a trowel and a bucket to pull weeds, a task I could supposedly manage without hurting myself. I was on my knees, digging my fingers into the damp earth, the ever-present eye of the security camera humming over the garage, when I heard his voice, a low rumble from behind the azalea bushes lining the property line. Margaret. I looked up, shielding my eyes. He was on his side of the low fence, pretending to inspect a sprinkler head. Keep your head down, he murmured, not looking at me. Nod if you can hear me? I lowered my head and nodded, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I don't want to frighten you, Margaret, he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the sound of a distant lawnmower. But I saw them. Last Thursday, when you were at your club. They had a van, I froze, my hand deep in the soil. They brought things out. Boxes. They were careful, wrapped in blankets, but one was large, big and flat, about 4 feet by 3. Looked exactly like that seascape painting you and Arthur had over the sofa, the one with the cliffs. The trowel fell from my hand. The painting. It was a wedding gift from my parents. It was the first thing Arthur and I had ever hung on these walls, the focal point of our life together. The thought of their hands on it, wrapping it in a blanket like common freight, a cold, sharp nausea rose in my throat. "They're watching you from the house," Henderson said, his voice urgent, but even. "They're counting on you being confused. They think you're not paying attention." He paused, and I knew he was looking at me now. "So you have to let them. You have to play the part. Margaret, be more confused than they ever expected. Be forgetful. Be frail. But you watch them. You watch everything." He picked up his garden shears and began to snip at a stray branch, his part of the conversation over. I remained on my knees, the damp earth seeping through my trousers. The last wisp of my self-doubt was gone, burned away by the icy certainty of his words. This was not protection. This was not care. This was a systematic pillaging, and they were using my mind as their cover story. "All right," I whispered to the weeds. "All right." The next morning, I began my performance. I, who had indexed tens of thousands of books, suddenly could not remember where the spoons were kept, despite the 6-inch tall label. I came downstairs wearing one of Arthur's old cardigans over my housecoat. At lunch, I forgot Tori's name. "I'm so sorry, dear," I said, looking at her with watery, confused eyes. "You've been so kind. What did David say your name was Trixie?" The flash of anger in her eyes was so quick I almost missed it, before it was replaced by that sickly sweet condescension. "It's Tori, Mother Margaret. Don't you worry." David looked miserable. "Mum, please. You know Tori." "Of course I do," I'd reply, only to ask him to pass the salt to Trixie 2 minutes later. That evening, I accidentally spilled a bowl of lukewarm soup directly onto Tori's pristine white laptop, which she'd carelessly left on the dining table. Her shriek was music. I dissolved into what I hoped was a convincing puddle of apologies and, "Oh, I'm so clumsy," Arthur always said. The crowning achievement was when I sat in the living room, under the watchful eye of their camera, and began a one-sided conversation with the empty armchair opposite me. "Oh, Arthur," I said, my voice warm and conversational. "You should have seen the hydrangeas today. They miss you." I heard Tori's sharp intake of breath from the kitchen doorway. Later that night, I heard her whispering urgently to David in their bedroom, which was just down the hall from mine. "I told you, David," she hissed. "She's declining. Fast. We're running out of time." David's reply was a low, mournful rumble, but I heard no protest. He was a passenger in his own life, and his conscience was easily silenced. After 3 days of my new persona, I set the bait. I found them both at the kitchen island, scrolling through what I now assumed were online catalogues for their grotesque wedding. I approached the table slowly, leaning on it as if for support. "David," I said, my voice thin and reedy. "I've been thinking." They both looked up, wary. I'd like to go to Bend," I said, letting my eyes drift to the window. "To see my sister." Tori's eyes narrowed. Bend? That's a 3-hour bus ride. Margaret, I don't think that's a good idea. My doctor is there. I lied. A feat of inspiration. Dr. Matthews. He had my, the pills, my medicine. I feel so foggy lately. I think I need my medicine. The change in Tori was electric. Her entire body went from rigid suspicion to beaming relief. A week-long trip. An entire week without the senile old woman. An entire week to do God knows what. Mum, that's a brilliant idea, she said, her voice positively sparkling. A change of scenery will do you good, right? David? David nodded, looking relieved for a different reason. Yeah, Mum, that sounds good. I'll buy your ticket. Oh, thank you, children, I said, letting a tear roll down my cheek. You're so good to me. Tori nearly vibrated with joy. I'll go pack your bags right now, she chirped, and for the first time, I knew she was thinking, and I'll make sure you don't pack anything valuable. The next morning, David drove me to the bus station. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by his nervous tapping on the steering wheel. He walked me to the gate, carrying the small suitcase Tori had packed for me filled, I'd already checked, with my oldest, most threadbare clothing. He hugged me, his arms stiff. I love you, Mum. I love you. David, I said, looking into his eyes, searching for the boy I had raised. He looked away first. You? Be careful. Call me when you get to Aunt Mary's. A flicker of guilt, quickly extinguished. He turned and walked away before the bus had even started to board. I got on the bus. I found a seat by the window. I watched the station slide away, and at the very next stop, not 10 minutes later, in a nondescript neighborhood in southeast Portland, I got off. Mr. Henderson's old pickup truck was waiting at the corner, just as we'd planned. He didn't say a word, just leaned over and opened the passenger door. He didn't take me to his house. That would be the first place they'd look, if they even bothered. Instead, he drove 3 blocks away from our street, down an alley, and parked behind a faceless, modern apartment building. He led me to a small, furnished rental on the 3rd floor, one he'd paid for in cash for 2 weeks. It was sterile, impersonal, and had a perfect, unobstructed view of the alley that ran behind my house. Now, we wait, Henderson said. He handed me a high-powered pair of binoculars and a fresh, unlined notebook. War, I thought, as I clicked the pen, has officially begun. For the first 2 days, we watched, taking shifts with the binoculars. The waiting was an agony of its own. It was not a heist. It was a slow, methodical erasure. They started with what they must have considered clutter. I watched, my knuckles white on the notebook, as David hauled heavy black trash bags to the curb. I knew what was in them. Arthur's tweed jackets, the ones that still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco. My paperbacks, the ones I'd collected over a lifetime, their spines cracked and pages dog-eared with love. It was a brutal, heartless spring cleaning, and it was only the prelude. Then, on Tuesday evening, just as the watery Portland dusk began to settle, the real performance began. A car glided into my driveway, not a van this time, but a sleek, silver sedan that gleamed under the streetlights. A man in a tailored suit stepped out. Even from a distance, I knew him. Julian Vance. His photograph was often in the society pages. He was the owner of Heritage Valuations, an auction house downtown that dealt only in the finest estates. "It's Vance," I whispered, my voice flat. Henderson nodded grimly, his own binoculars pressed to his eyes. The vultures are sending their king. We watched as Tori, dressed in a sharp black dress as if hosting a cocktail party, opened the front door with a flourish. She was all smiles and bright, animated gestures. Through the lenses, I could see her lead Julian through my living room, her hand sweeping through the air, pointing. I could almost hear her tinkling, false laugh. Julian Vance did not laugh. He was all business, nodding slowly, tapping notes into a sleek tablet he carried. Then they started bringing things out. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. First, Julian's assistant, a young man in a similar suit, carried out the heavy oak case that held Arthur's coin collection, his life's quiet passion, his Roman silver and Byzantine gold, carried out like office supplies. Next came my grandmother's silver, the entire heavy chest of it, the one it had taken me a full day to polish before Christmas every year. Tori stood by, holding the door open, beaming as if she were a generous benefactor. And then I stopped breathing. Julian and his man emerged carrying my cello. I hadn't played it in perhaps 15 years, not since my arthritis had taken hold, but it was a part of me. It was the music of my youth. They slid it carefully into the back of the sedan. My son, David, appeared then. He didn't help. He just stood in the frame of the front door, a shadow in his own home, watching. He made no move to stop them. He didn't raise a hand. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, a silent accomplice to the stripping of his own history. We watched until the sedan's trunk was closed. Julian handed Tori a small, white envelope, a check. She took it with a little flourish, and as his car pulled away, she actually blew a kiss after it. I lowered the binoculars, my hands shaking, but not from weakness. It was rage, cold and pure. It was a fuel I had not felt in years. "He just stood there," I said, the words barely audible. He watched them. Henderson didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the house. "They're celebrating," he said. "Tori just did a little dance in the kitchen." He paused, then finally turned to me, his expression grim but satisfied. "I went over when they were out yesterday," he said quietly, tapping a spot on the window ledge. "You see that new birdhouse I hung on the garage, by the alley light? It's not for wrens." He pulled a small tablet from his own bag. "It's motion activated, high definition. It recorded the car, his face, every single item they loaded, and the check-changing hands. We have it all. Margaret. Every last second." The next morning, we watched them leave. They were laughing, heading out in Tori's convertible. For a full day of wedding planning, as we'd overheard Tori tell David, they were giddy with the success of their sale. They would be gone for hours. "Now," I said to Henderson. We crossed the street and walked up my own driveway. I felt like a trespasser in my own life. Tori had, of course, installed a new security system. She had given me a simplified fob to carry, but I could see the keypad by the door. She had been careless. She had assumed the old code. Arthur's birthday was long forgotten by his senile wife. My fingers were steady as I typed in the 6 digits. The system chirped once and went silent. The light turned green. I pushed open my own front door. Henderson followed me inside, and we both stood silent in the entryway. The house was cold, but it was the emptiness that struck me, that sucked the air from my lungs. It was an echoing void. The walls were naked, pockmarked with small nail holes where our family photographs had hung for 40 years. My son's first steps, my wedding day. Arthur holding a baby David, all gone. There were pale rectangles on the hardwood floors where side tables had stood, and a vast, empty space on the living room rug where my cello used to be. The seascape was gone, leaving a glaring, blank spot over the sofa. This was not a home. It was a ransacked shell, a stage being cleared for the next act. I walked past the desecrated living room and went straight to Arthur's study. The door was ajar. They hadn't even bothered to close it. David's laptop was on the desk, left open and awake. His email inbox was on the screen. He had always been careless with technology. A thread at the top of the inbox was from Tori, sent just last night, after their celebration. The subject line hit me like a physical blow: urgent guardianship proceedings. I sat in Arthur's chair, my hand gripping the armrest so tightly my knuckles ached. Henderson stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. The email was to a law firm. I read Tori's words, each one a perfectly placed nail in my coffin. David is providing his formal testimony tomorrow, she had written. We have the documentation from the Cascade Mental Health Clinic, which I've attached. It confirms her acute cognitive decline and delusional episodes. We need to secure power of attorney before the wedding date. This will allow us to liquidate the remaining assets, including the house, to fund her long-term care. My eyes scanned down. Remaining assets. My house. Long-term care. A nursing home. She attached a file. Henderson said, his voice a low growl. I clicked on the attachment. A mental health evaluation form scanned into a PDF. It was 2 pages of clinical observations, checking boxes for agitation, memory loss, paranoia. And at the bottom, a signature. Lena Horowitz, M.D. Psh.D. I stared at the name. It felt impossible. Dr. Lena Horowitz. I knew Lena. We were in the same Thursday book club for 5 years. We'd argued over Faulkner. We'd had lunch. And Lena Horowitz was a child psychologist. She worked with traumatized elementary school students. She had never, not once, met me in a professional capacity. The signature was a decent forgery, but it was a forgery nonetheless. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This was never just about a lavish wedding. That was the cover, the quick cash grab. This was the real plan. This was a cold, legal maneuver to have me declared incompetent, to steal my home, my money, my future, and to lock me away where I could no longer be an inconvenience. They weren't just thieves. They were architects of my social and legal death. I looked at Henderson. The quiet, neighborly man was gone. In his place was someone I had not seen before. Someone with a carpenter's cold, precise anger. They're thorough, I said, my voice empty of all emotion. They're trying to erase me. Then, he said, pulling a chair up to the desk, we'd better get to work. We weren't done. The email was damning, but it felt incomplete. It was too clean, too legal. This was Tori's plan. It needed her vanity. Check his browser history, Henderson said, his voice hard. The night of the sale, after Julian Vance left. I clicked through the history. A search for a steakhouse, a link to a men's suit website. And then, there it was, David and Tori Sweet as Honey. A wedding website. I clicked the link. The page that loaded was a gauzy, soft focus picture of them in a field, captioned, "The adventure begins." A box demanded a password. What could it be? Henderson muttered. I tried the obvious. Arthur, 1978. Access denied. I tried Margaret Senile. Access denied. I sat back, thinking about my son, about the boy he was, not the man he had become. A memory surfaced. A scruffy little terrier mix he'd found when he was 10. I typed, "Fluffy boy." The page opened. It was a monument to their own perfection. Dozens of professional photographs of them, laughing, kissing, staring soulfully into the camera. Tori in a silk gown in the vineyards, David in an expensive-looking linen suit, looking adoringly at her. There were tabs for the venue, our story, and one that wasn't a gift registry. It was labelled, "Our Journey." I clicked it. The page was a long blog post written by Tori. Her writing style was just like her voice, breathless and full of counterfeit emotion. It was a long, tear-soaked narrative. But it wasn't about them. It was about me. She wrote about the heroic David, forced to carry the tragic burden of a mother who was, as she put it, sinking gracefully but rapidly into the darkness of Alzheimer's. She praised his strength, his selflessness, his willingness to make the hard choices. My hands were steady on the mouse as I scrolled down. "We have been faced with some impossibly difficult decisions," she wrote. "We've had to say goodbye to some of the heavy burdens of the family's past. My cello, my grandmother's silver, Arthur's watches." She called them burdens. "We are doing this not just to fund a bright new future for ourselves, but more importantly, to ensure we can afford the comprehensive, round-the-clock care that Mother Margaret deserves at the finest facility." A link at the very bottom of the post, under a picture of me she must have taken while I was sleeping in my chair. A link to a GoFundMe page. My name, my tragic story, and a goal of $30,000. They weren't just stealing from me. They were monetizing me. They were using my fictionalized, humiliating decline as a fundraising tool for their champagne and silk wedding. This was the final, most profound indignity. Not just to be robbed, but to be turned into a public object of pity, a prop in their romantic narrative. I did not cry. I did not rage. The part of me that could do either of those things had frozen solid. I methodically began to take screenshots. Every page, every photograph, every single word of that journey. I saved them to a thumb drive Henderson had brought. When I was finished, I clicked Log Out. I closed the browser. I stood up from Arthur's desk. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice so calm it frightened me. "I think it is time for me to call my lawyer. And then I'm going to call Dr. Horowitz." We returned to the third-floor apartment, the thumb drive containing my digital humiliation, feeling heavy as a brick in my pocket. The time for passive observation was over. It was time to build an army. I picked up my phone. My first call was to Eliza Baird, my estate lawyer for the last 20 years. She's a woman who wears steel-rimmed glasses and has a voice that could file down iron. She answered on the second ring. "Eliza," I said, my voice perfectly level. "It's Margaret Vega. I need to see you immediately. I am being robbed. Not by a stranger, but by my son. And I have proof." There was a beat of silence. "How soon can you be at this address?" she asked. My second call was to Lena Horowitz. I found her number in my old book club directory. She answered. her voice warm and professional. Lena, this is Margaret Vega. Margaret Goodness, it's been ages. How are you? I'm afraid I'm not well, I said, though not in the way you might think. Lena, I have to ask you a very direct question. Have you, at any point, signed a medical evaluation declaring me mentally incompetent? The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, a sharp, indignant gasp. Margaret, what are you talking about? That's preposterous. I'm a child psychologist. I know, I said, but your forged signature is currently on my son's computer, attached to an email to his lawyer, as part of an emergency guardianship petition. They are using it to steal my home. They did what? Her voice was no longer warm. It was a blade. Where are you? Margaret, I'm on my way. While I made my calls, Henderson made his. He had a friend, a retired Portland PD detective named Sal. He wasn't calling to report a crime. Not yet. He was asking for strategy. Sal, it's Frank Henderson. I've got a situation. Elder fraud. Textbook. We've got video. We've got forged documents. We want to stop it. How do we do this clean? Sal, how do we set the trap so they can't wriggle out of it? Henderson listened for a long time, nodding, taking notes on a small pad. Got it, he said. That's exactly what we'll do. There was one more call to make. This one was mine, but I would be playing a different role. I looked at the notes Henderson had taken. They're planning to take the piano, I said, and the art glass. I dialed the number for Heritage Valuations. Julian Vance's office. A slick voice answered. I pitched my voice lower, adopting Eliza's ironclad professionalism. This is Eliza Baird, calling on behalf of Margaret Vega. Mr. Vance, I'm calling to confirm the details for the next pickup. My client has been rather scattered and wants to ensure her schedule is clear. The man's tone warmed instantly. Ah, yes, Ms. Baird. Of course. Mr. Vance was very pleased with the initial consignment. Such exquisite taste. Indeed, I said dryly. And the next pickup. We are scheduled for this Friday at 10 a.m., he said. We'll be sending our team for the Steinway Baby Grand and the Chihuly glass collection. Will that be all? That will be all. Thank you, I said, and hung up. 2 hours later, my safe house had become a war room. Eliza Baird sat at the small table, her laptop open. Dr. Lena Horowitz sat beside her, radiating a controlled fury. Mr. Henderson stood by the window, watching my house. It's perfect, Eliza said, after reviewing everything. The video from Henderson's birdhouse, the screenshots from the wedding website and the GoFundMe page, the fraudulent medical evaluation, which Dr. Horowitz was prepared to testify against as a personal and professional outrage. They're thieves, plain and simple, Henderson said. The police should just pick them up. No, Eliza said, holding up a hand. That's messy. It becomes, he said, she said. David will cry. Tori will lie. They'll say Margaret gave them permission in a confused state. The forged document is our ace, but the sale is our leverage. She looked at me, a rare, thin smile on her face. They're expecting a confused old woman. They are not expecting an organized prosecution. She closed her laptop. So, this is what we do. We're not going to stop the sale on Friday. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. We're going to attend it. Friday morning, 9 o'clock. I walked from the apartment, rounded the corner, and stood on my own front porch. I took a deep breath, then pulled out my cell phone and dialed David's number. I let my voice crack, pitching it high with manufactured exhaustion and panic. David. Honey. Mom? His voice was sharp, instantly alert and annoyed. What's wrong? You're supposed to be in bed? I don't know, David. I whimpered. The bus. It was the wrong one, I think. I got so turned around. I came home. I'm on the porch. I'm so tired. I heard a muffled sound, him covering the phone, and Tori's sharp, "What now?" He came back on the line, his voice tight with a poorly concealed rage. "Stay right there, Mum. We're on our way. Don't move." I sat on my own porch swing, the one Arthur had built, and waited. Less than 10 minutes later, Tori's convertible screeched to a halt at the curb. They both spilled out. David's face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. Tori's was a mask of fury, which she quickly rearranged into a brittle smile when she saw me. "Mum, you're back early," she chirped, rushing up the walk. "You gave us such a scare, we were so worried." "I'm sorry," I said, playing my part to the end. "I just got so confused." "Well, let's get you inside," she said, grabbing my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. "You must be exhausted." They bustled me into the house, into the cold, empty living room. I sat in my armchair, the one they hadn't taken yet, and let them flutter around me with false concern. They were trapped. They couldn't leave me, but they had an appointment to keep. I watched David pace, looking at his watch, then at me, right on time, at exactly 10 o'clock. The doorbell rang. The sound was like a cannon shot in the quiet room. David froze. Tori's smile twitched. "Oh, goodness," I said, looking around innocently. "Are we expecting company?" David, looking like a man walking to the gallows, went to the door. He opened it. There stood Julian Vance, flanked by 2 young men in matching navy blue uniforms, clipboards in hand. "Hello, David," Julian said, his voice smooth as polished wood. "Right on time. Are you ready for us?" David's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Julian," he finally managed to stammer, now is not a good time. My mother, she's... Oh, I think this is precisely the time." A new voice cut through the air, a woman's voice, sharp as steel. Eliza Baird, my lawyer, stepped past David and into my entryway. She was followed by Dr. Lena Horowitz, whose face was a thundercloud of righteous anger, and behind them, 2 uniformed officers from the Portland Police Bureau, their presence filling the doorway, solid and unmovable. The trap was sprung. Julian Vance's professional smile vanished. He stood stock still, his eyes darting from Eliza to the police officers. David physically recoiled, stumbling back a step as if he'd been struck. Tori, I noted with grim satisfaction, didn't look at me or David. She looked at the back door. She was calculating her escape. Then, I stood up. I walked from the shadows of the living room into the bright light of the hall. I was no longer the frail, confused woman of the last week. I stood tall. Eliza and Dr. Horowitz parted to let me stand before my son. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was not thin. It was not reedy. It was clear. It was strong. And it echoed in the half-empty house. "I'm so glad you could all make it." I looked at Julian, then at David, then at Tori. I believe you are all here regarding my property. Some of you, I nodded to Julian, are here to sell it. And some of you, I nodded to Eliza and the officers, are here to protect it. Tori's face, a mask of brittle lacquer, finally cracked. What the hell is this? She shrieked, her voice pitching into a sound I had never heard from her. Mom, what did you do? You're confused. You're senile, David. Tell them. Tell them how confused she is. All eyes turned to my son. David just stood there, his gaze fixed on a bare spot on the floor where a rug used to be. His face was the color of ash. He didn't speak. He just stared. As silent tears began to trace paths down his cheeks. Dr. Horowitz, her eyes burning with a cold fire, stepped forward. Miss Victoria, she said, her voice cutting through the room. I am Dr. Lena Horowitz. I have never, in my life, met Margaret Vega. But this, she held up the printed-out PDF, is my forged signature on a fraudulent medical evaluation. That is medical fraud, and it is a felony. Julian Vance, who had been trying to blend into the wallpaper, took an involuntary step back. Eliza turned on him, her own voice like ice. And you, Mr. Vance, you have been actively purchasing stolen goods from individuals with no legal right to sell, all while the legal owner was being systematically deceived. We have video of your last transaction, including the exchange of payment. Julian began to sweat profusely, dabbing at his forehead with a silk handkerchief. I turned my attention back to my son. He was trembling, a silent, pathetic figure. I spoke to him, not with anger, but with a quiet sadness. David, I said, my voice gentle. He flinched and looked up, his face a ruin of guilt. Your father left you his grandfather's silver compass, I said softly. Do you remember you were 12? He told you it would always help you find your way home. I paused. Did you sell that too, David? Or is it still here? Somewhere. That was the word that broke him. The compass. He let out a great, shuddering sob that seemed to tear itself from his very soul. I'm sorry. Mom, he wailed, sinking to his knees. I'm so sorry it was Tori. It was all her idea. The wedding. The money. She said you'd never even know. She said you wouldn't remember. You coward! Tori screamed, her face contorted with rage, turning on him. You pathetic coward, you wanted this just as much as I did. The senior police officer had seen enough. He stepped forward, his hand on his service belt. Ma'am? Sir? We have enough evidence of theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder fraud, and forgery to detain you. He nodded to his partner. Please place your hands behind your backs. As the second officer moved to cuff Tori, she lunged, and he restrained her, her purse clattering from her shoulder to the floor. The officer picked it up, opened it, and dumped its contents onto the hall table to ensure she had no weapons. Amidst the lipstick, the phone, and the keys, a small, familiar object rolled out and came to rest on the wood. My great-grandmother's pearl brooch. They were cuffed. David was sobbing uncontrollably, a broken child. Tori was vibrating with a silent, murderous fury. As the officers led them out the front door, she twisted around, her eyes locking on me. You ruined everything, she screamed, her voice echoing in the empty hall. You're just a vindictive, senile old woman. I watched her for a moment. Then, I slowly walked to the table. I picked up my pearl brooch. Its weight was familiar, solid in my hand. I calmly fastened it to the collar of my blouse. I looked up and met her gaze, right through the open door. "That's right," I said. And for the first time in months, I smiled. "But this senile old woman just ruined your wedding." I stepped back and shut the door, the click of the lock echoing finality. I was alone, in my empty, quiet house. And at last, I was at peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please, drop a comment below and let's chat about what you thought. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button to help share this story with more people.